There's a particular detail that can get lost in the mix as you're describing the scenery, the setting, the sights, sounds, and smells, and that's the armor everybody's wearing. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire, here today to offer up a little bit more advice for all you DMs, GMs, Storytellers, whatever title you may decide to call yourself by. This is something that is going to be applicable no matter the game or setting that you're running for your players, whether it's Star Wars, Traveler, Pathfinder, D20 Modern, Shadowrun, Vampire the Masquerade. Any of these games, settings, the worlds that they may feature, this detail describing the armor, the clothes, these different accoutrements that they might be wearing can help to really make your world feel a bit more distinct and make specific NPCs that much more recognizable. Where when you start going into those details and start talking about the armor that they're fitted with, they're going to go, "Oh, I remember this person. She was a massive problem. Oh man, we are in trouble." Those things can just be absolutely incredible, and it's something that, admittedly, at least for me and a number of other DMs I've gotten to know over the years, it's something that can really just kind of end up being forgotten about in the midst of all of the other things that get described, that need to be described in order to facilitate moving the story forwards. So it's definitely something worth paying attention to and keeping in mind, and maybe even doing a little bit of research on if you're not familiar with the different kinds of historical forms of armor beyond what's just listed in your Pathfinder book, your core rulebook for D&D, whatever game you may be running. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, then go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now we'll actually start talking about armor, and you can think of so many different examples in pop culture that just really make everything stand out, that immediately conjure to mind some of the most renowned forces that you could possibly face. Like if you start talking about this gleaming white carapace that seems to be accented with little layers of black beneath it, how the soldiers are carrying their blaster rifles right there in their hands, and the gleaming black lenses just emit no light, no reaction, no sign of human presence underneath of it. You're very much describing stormtroopers from the Star Wars setting, and you're getting the sense that, that this is this empire throwing down these masses of troops, these faceless, emotionless seeming troops that just march on their enemies and just lay down wave after wave, volley after volley of deadly blaster fire. Or if you start talking about the ballistic plates and the kinds of ablative armors that are worn by corporate security forces, styled like samurai armor of the Sengoku Jidai period and colored just this deep crimson red, fitted with all the latest cyber tech, cyber gear, all of these different things that just a high-end mega corporation could ever hope to field. Well, now you're describing the Renraku Red Samurai, and they're the elite, most lethal special forces on the planet. I mean, the special forces of all the world governments fear Renraku Red Samurai. The special forces of other megacorps fear, or at least respect, Renraku Red Samurai for just how lethally effective they are, how peerlessly well trained and incredibly well equipped they are. Definitely a fighting force upon which there is no expense spared, as they are outfitted with the latest tech, the most lethal weapons, the best trained mages, everything. Red Samurai are not to be underestimated, and once they don their helms and those horns come to life and they begin blazing and crackling with the arcane energies that they channel, or activating their cyberware, moving at lethally blinding speeds, wielding just monomolecular edge katanas, it's absolutely staggering and really can do a lot to put the fear of whatever gods or spirits your players may be following into their hearts, and it's fantastic. And of course, there's so many other things that you can take too. Just take your basic leather armor. Yeah, it's leather armor, but there's all kinds of leather and hides out there that can be used to make that kind of armor, to decorate it. There's so many different ways of decorating it too. Instead of just saying, well, the town guards here, it's more of a local militia. They're just wearing simple leather armor. Okay, well, simple leather armor does conjure an image, but it's kind of a blank slate image. Why not just go in? You can see the rough hand stitching that hold the shoulder padding in place on the armor. You can actually see that some of them have had their armor colored or recently polished, or it's dusty from the wear from being on the trail. That it's been a few weeks, they've been out on patrol, so it's in a rougher state. And so the militia that are in town, their armor is much cleaner and much more presentable, although it is drab, older, and you can see some places where the stitching's kind of coming apart. It definitely conjures more of an image of a rough kind of hewn together militia, just kind of something cobbled together for the town or hamlet's communal defense. Whereas if you go into a larger city, a more metropolitan area, the city guards might be wearing well-oiled and well-cared for chain hauberk with a breastplate set over it, and they even have greaves and arm guards put on into place to help give them and afford them a greater degree of protection, with sweeping blue cloaks trimmed with gold, and they're wearing steepled nasal helms to have the nasal cover coming down over them. Or even if you went with sallets or barbutas, I might be mispronouncing that, but there are so many different helmets out there. Or the crested helms that the Greeks wore, those particular Corinthian helms and the like. All these different things can just add that much more detail and conjure so many different kinds of images and help to make different regions distinct. And you can make it immediately clear who is or is not a city guardsman just on visual cue by describing the uniformity of the armor and how each of them's led by a sergeant. And the sergeants are marked out by distinctive crests that they wear on the breastplate. Now, the regular soldiers may have a simple crest adorning it, the symbol of the city, but the sergeant's crest may have an additional shield or a little bit of heraldry to it to mark them out as a distinct figure, just a step above the regular city guardsman overall. Or, even if you go to the Warhammer 40k setting and you describe those German combat helms with the spiked tops to them, and those dark, dirty, muddy gas masks with those soulless lenses, carrying las rifles that look distinctly like they're patterned off of World War I bolt-action rifles and the like. Oh, you're conjuring up a very stark image of this muddy trench warfare figure of the oh shoot, now I just blanked on their name. The Guardsmen of Krieg, the Krieg Guardsmen, the very famous siege warfare experts, trench fighting, just brutal, lethal, fanatically loyal, almost suicidally loyal, to the point that they're willing to take losses in extremes that just really worry other guardsmen. And sometimes the commissars, rather than having to shoot those that are retreating, they sometimes have to shoot a couple of Kriegsmen in order to keep them from charging out too soon into the midst of artillery fire. Just you can conjure up those feelings, you can describe all of that and make very distinct images for your players to grasp onto and latch onto really hard, that help get them more familiar and comfortable with the setting. And yeah, it's just extra layers of things. And well, I kind of got away from what I was talking about before with leather armor there. Leather armor, I mean, you have crocodile hide that can be put over it, or if you're using enough layers of it, you can just have this crocodilian leather armor. Or if you're dealing with giant snakes, giant constrictors and the like, they can be layering on those snake scales to make thicker and thicker pieces of armor. And it's visually distinct. It may not be statistically very different from just baseline leather armor, but it is definitely a much more evocative image that you're putting out there for your players to make things that much more distinct. And it tells them about, again, the setting. If they're wearing crocodile or leather armor made from crocodiles or giant snakes, it's a warmer, more humid climate. These are the resources that people have access to. They seem to have very little problem fighting crocs or giant constrictors, to the point that they'll harvest the meat, the bones, the teeth, the fangs. If they have venom, they'll harvest the venom. They'll make armor from the various layers upon layers of scales and skin. On and on and on, and that can really do a lot to just kind of like, okay, this setting makes sense. They're making materials out of the resources that they have around them, and they're making all of these tools based on these things. So it just, again, adds on and on and on to it. And you can do the same thing with padded armor. Say if they're dealing with thick, luscious, dense jungle foliage, all these different leaves and stuff. Sure, it's leaf armor, but you can easily stat it out as a form of padded armor because they just layer on leaves and leaves and leaves. And padded armor is just layers and layers and layers of woven reeds and the like, things like that. So it can actually get thicker and thicker and thicker and afford more protection over time. And it's actually surprisingly effective how well padded armor is in stopping all different kinds of lethal strikes from coming down on you. And one thing that you should never skip, even if a common soldier, even if a regular levy doesn't have armor, they're going to have something on their head. Even if it's just a cloth wrapping, or if they're wearing a pot on their head, they're going to do something to cover their head. That's something no soldier will ever be without: a weapon and something to protect their head. Because even back in ancient times, people figured out pretty damn fast that the head was important to protect. Everything else, potentially survivable. Strikes to the head, potentially very lethal very fast. Even if you're not dead in the moment, if you're dazed, if you're bleeding and can't see because everything's just coursing over your eyes, or if you're stunned and dazed and somebody comes up on you and begins skewering you, you're toast. Or even if you just take massive damage to the head, sure, maybe you're fine for a little bit, but you have a concussion, you go to sleep later, and never wake up again. So protecting your head is vitally important, and is something every single culture, every single sentient being that depends on their brain for survival is going to protect their head. So definitely something else to keep in mind there too, and is very readily forgotten just because, pop culture, movies, TV shows, you have to be able to see the people, and, you're paying all this money for these actors. You want them to be distinct. You want the audience to pick them out of a crowd. So it's something where it's just something easy to forget about. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Certainly let me know your thoughts down below, and what are some other things that you could describe for your players. Certainly, I didn't even get into the intricacies of plate armor, how you can have Baroque styles and designs going down it, and the fabulously wealthy, especially if they're going to tournaments and jousting and the like, they can have these helms with these incredible crests or plumes, or just even almost like miniature statue-like decorations on top of their heads, featuring dragons, unicorns, castles, all different kinds and manner of things possible there. And also just how resplendently colored things can be. Medieval people loved to have color. People think, they're poor, they're dirty. It's like, it wasn't all quite that poor and that dirty. Colors and decorations were made pretty readily available, especially with all the festivals that they had. I mean, peasants didn't have to work all that much. I mean, they worked hard, and when they worked hard, they were working very hard, but they had lots of time in between, especially since most of their work was around harvests and the like. So colors like purple were incredibly hard to get a hold of and were incredibly expensive, but reds, blues, yellows, greens, and browns too, even gold colors, those were readily available to one degree or another. And medieval people all across the world love having things just splashed with color, so it's another thing to keep in mind there. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't done so already, hit those like or dislike buttons and we'll engage in discussion. Oh, and today, the voting for the next class that I cover will be going up. I just wanted to take a little bit of a break from it and figure things out, get things set up here, so everything like that is all done. So be looking for that. That poll will be going up just shortly after this video goes up, so go and make your votes heard there. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.